In this video I will be showing you how I added voice control to my HDMI switch. Let's get started. I got this HDMI switch at a rummage sale for only $3, but it didn't come with any kind of remote control. While I probably could have just used a universal remote, I thought adding voice control would be cooler. I have recently been setting up a smart house controlled by OpenHab, and I will post some more videos about that in the future. As part of the setup, I got an Amazon Echo and Fire TV, and after finding out that I could control the Fire TV with voice commands, I was hooked. However, sometimes I will use my monitor for things like working on my Raspberry Pi, or using my Windows PC to print something on my 3D printer. Then later, after I've gotten settled into bed with my cat in my arm and want to watch TV, I realize I forgot to switch back to the Fire TV input. At that point, the last thing I want to do is get up. So I decided to try and make it so I can control my HDMI switch using voice commands. Some features I added are being able to select a specific port, turning the unit on and off, and cycling through all the ports. I started out by opening the HDMI switch to see if there was enough room to fit an ESP8266 module inside, and found that there was plenty of space. Next, I checked to see what voltage everything was running at, and found a voltage conversion circuit on the board that took the 5 volts and stepped it down to 3.3 volts. I decided to run wires from the LEDs to the GPIO inputs to check the current status and run a wire to the button to emulate pressing it. I started off soldering some wires to the leads of the LEDs, but realized they were turned off by raising the cathode side of the 3.3 volts rather than lowering the anode side to ground. I reran wires and connected them to an SMT resistor that was connected to the cathode side of each LED and taped them down so they wouldn't get yanked off. I also decided to get a mini node MCU D1 module so it would be easier to program. For the code, since I didn't want to spend a lot of time writing the basic framework, I decided to modify some firmware code that was written for some of my other smart house devices and concentrate on the code specific to the HDMI switch. It works by communicating with an MQTT server that I had already set up with OpenHab. For my modifications, I started by reading which LED was low to see which port was selected. Once that was working, I decided to work on the button. I tried out various circuits such as controlling a transistor to emulate the button press, but it was very finicky. After getting it to function intermittently, I realized the GPIO was sometimes starting high and sometimes low, and it only worked if it started high. I wired it up to a different GPIO and it worked consistently. After working the code some more, I finally had it working great. I went ahead and placed a jumper over the 2 pins I had soldered onto the board to ground GPIO 0 and uploaded the sketch. While attempting to get the button working, I discovered that holding it down for a little bit would toggle the power. After thinking about it for a few days, I decided to run another wire to the power LED to have it respond appropriately depending on the device state. However, it was not behaving as expected and would say it was on even when it was off. Fortunately, there was a place on the board for another LED that was changing the voltage levels depending on the state of the device. I rewired it and changed my code accordingly, and it was able to accurately tell the device state. I added some electrical tape on a few of the contacts so nothing would touch that wasn't supposed to. When I had finished assembling everything, I was able to fit everything inside so you can't even tell it was modified. Because of the way the firmware works, I have been able to do all of my subsequent uploads over the air. Since I have the OpenHab skill installed with Alexa, I'm able to control all of my OpenHab devices by voice control, including my HDMI switch. To allow it to work with specific ports, I set it up as a dimmable light in OpenHab, and so levels 1 through 4 select a port, and setting it to 100 will cycle through all 4 ports, which can be useful when the monitor goes to sleep. On and off commands also work. As a bonus, I can also control the HDMI switch from my phone using the OpenHab app. Here's the HDMI switch in action. If you have an Echo device, you may want to mute it. Alexa, set HDMI switch to 3.
Okay.
Alexa, turn off HDMI switch.
Okay.
Alexa, Turn on HDMI switch.
Okay.
Alexa, set HDMI switch to 100.
Okay.
Unfortunately, during the filming of this video, I accidentally plugged in a 12-volt power supply into the HDMI switch, which ended up frying not only the circuitry of the HDMI switch, but also the controller I added. That's the bad news. The good news is that means I have another video to do. So this is actually going to only end up being part 1. Part 2, I'm going to go ahead and rebuild the whole thing for you. So I have an HDMI switch on order, and as soon as that comes in, I'll go ahead and film that. Thanks for watching. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it or it helped you. Also, be sure to subscribe and click on that bell icon to be notified about my future videos.